Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. Welcome back, of course, presuming that you've been waiting all week for it to return, and you're like, wow, I'm used to them taking a 3.5 minute break, but a 6 day break? That's a little bit too far. But anyway, we're here. We've returned to the scene of the crime. The crime being pirate radio. But anyway, I'm here with the show. The show being Indiepocalypse Radio, being the show about Indiepocalypse largely. Indiepocalypse being a monthly anthology of games, and myself being Andrew, the person who puts it all together from its origins to now. Still, I continue to put it together. But what, might you ask, are people putting together? Like, what is to be put together? And that is where I segue to our guest here, our solo guest for the show, who you may know from issue 35 of Indiepocalypse, the no longer golden baby child of Indiepocalypse, now displaced by its new entry. With Into Ruins. It's Eric Billingsley. Eric, hello. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing well. Glad to be on the show.
Great. Glad to have you here. I'm going to jump into the question that my informal marketing question that I'm dying to know of every guest, which is, hey, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
That is a good question. I feel like I remember seeing it posted about it around on Twitter, and I think it got featured on Itch a few times. I remember seeing Natalie Lawhead's zine maker thing, which was in it.
Yes.
And then it was my friend Brendan McLeod who actually suggested I submit my game to it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I remember being aware that it was around for a little while.
Yeah,
and I think it's a very cool thing, like spotlighting all these smaller games that are interesting and made by cool people. And yeah, thanks for including me in it.
No, thanks for submitting it. Thanks for finding it. This is, of course, my informer. When I always got to figure out how to get people into it, because I mean, listen, if nobody buys it, it'll still technically can exist if people still submit games to it. But if they don't do that, it creates a lot more work. So it's always important to know how do people get their way here.
Yeah.
Because I don't have what they would call a platform, at least so far as the numbers are to be believed. I think you need 10K to have a platform, traditionally speaking, you know? Anyway.
Like followers, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I also don't have a platform in that case.
Right. It's because you need just that real scattershot approach.
Yeah.
Or you need a lot of very dedicated people who will also promote your stuff actively. I've found it takes way more time.
It's hard.
But I feel like the times where you put in the effort to be not just hit a share button, but be like, hey, I like this thing. When you also hit the share button, I found it goes a lot further, but it also takes way more time to do.
Yeah. Be more intentional about that.
Yeah, you have to think about what you have to say. So then, if you don't feel like you immediately have the right thing to say, you're like, uh-oh. But anyway, that is to say that I've found people with much smaller platforms actively saying something are more effective than people with massive platforms sharing without saying anything at all.
Yeah, because it all depends on who takes notice of it in your circle or whatever.
Right, and it can be how often do people just kind of share promotional stuff online, all the time?
Yeah.
And you're like, but anyway, speaking of promotional stuff, we're here to promote your game, Into Ruins. So tell me, what is Into Ruins? Presuming
So
I did not know what it was. I am the layperson here.
so Into Ruins is a roguelike that I made for the Pico 8 fantasy console. Um, it has pixel art and like an sort of isometric view with a hex grid, and it's like a traditional roguelike, so it's got, turn-based combat, and you're identifying items and trying to get to the bottom of a dungeon,
Yeah.
basically, or cave slash dungeon. And it was very inspired by the game Brogue by Brian Walker, which is like an ASCII roguelike that's pretty heavily influenced by the original Rogue, which I like a lot. And so I kind of borrowed a lot of stuff from that in making this, but also tried to sort of spin some things and put my own twist on things and take it in a little bit of a different direction.
Right, because the
Yeah.
roguelike, as I'm sure you know, it's taken a weird turn in like, I don't know, like the past 5, 10, maybe even decade or so.
Yeah. It's sort of like a ubiquitous thing now. Um, but a lot of games, I feel like for a while they were calling themselves roguelites or like roguelike likes, the
Yeah,
ones that weren't like, dungeon crawler turn-based things. But now it's sort of, I don't know. It's fine for the meanings of things to change, but this roguelike is more like a traditional roguelike, I guess.
more like Rogue.
Yes, more like Rogue.
That's something I've thought about recently, or in talking to someone. Is like, I'm wondering if these games are closer to, like, if you put 2 points down on a spectrum, are these games closer, like your average sort of like modern? You get upgrades, you do things. Eventually, you beat the game. Are they closer to like Rogue, or are they closer to like arcade games that just happen to have
Yeah,
like
that's a good question.
progression systems?
I think yeah, for me, like the big thing is whether there's like the procedural generation of levels
Right.
is like a pretty big component that a lot of old arcade games didn't really have. Um, but not everything has that in the roguelike genre now, so I don't know.
Yeah, and it's I just want to drink a potion and I don't know what it is, and I want to do bad things to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for me, actually, I think it was the roguelites or the roguelike likes that originally got me into roguelikes as a genre, because I think the first game like that I played was Spelunky.
Yeah, which definitely I think massages a lot of the a lot of cool elements into it. Like there's
Yeah.
and there's a but the thing is, yeah, that is also like an important thing. Is like a rogue is not friendly.
No, it's not. I think maybe before I played Spelunky, like I tried to play NetHack once, and I was just
Right.
like, I have no idea how to play this game, and it's not always. A lot of roguelikes in the traditional uh, genre are like not super approachable. That's not universally true, but some of them you need to play them for a really long time and like read wikis and stuff to really know what you're doing, um, which can be intimidating, I think.
Right. Right. There's just like kind of this density of ideas and built on top of kind of a not an antagonistic system, but kind of like a indifferent system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Like
which
and
is that's part of what kind of adds the risk and the excitement to the games, but it can also make it not very approachable for people, I think.
right, right, because it's like, oh,
Yeah.
was I ever going to win this run ever, or
Yeah.
was I doomed from the very start, from the moment the seed was generated? Was I ready? Was I set up to lose?
Yeah.
Which kind of lends itself to interesting design, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the kind of traditional roguelikes have a lot of sort of complex interacting systems and like a lot of items and a lot of monsters and a lot of complicated classes and things, and like So it can be intimidating, and also that sort of density of designed things is hard to translate to a very restricted platform like Pico 8 for what I was doing. So
Yes,
I
right.
wasn't able to make that type of roguelike. Really, in some ways, the platform kind of determined what kind of thing I could make, and then I kind of pushed it a little bit, but
But no,
yeah,
that's the interesting thing about like a truly restrictive platform like Pico 8 that is not like you can set your resolutions to be old resolutions and
yeah,
try to adhere yourself to things, but then if you're in Unity, you can always just like cheat if you if you're not figuring something out.
yeah,
When
exactly.
instead of like, do I like how do you like it doesn't have the same kind of like built-in sprite limit problems of an older console that you can just like I'll just cheat and not perfectly recreate this concept.
Yeah, and in some ways, like that really helps you sort of determine a scope. Although it's kind of hard because you have like the limited like sprites and like sounds and stuff. So for that, it's pretty easy to be like, okay, if each enemy has 4 frames of animation, that means I can have this many enemies, this many like tiles for the ground and that kind of thing. And you can scope that pretty easily. But then when you get to the limits on like how big your code can be, that's where it starts getting troublesome because
Right.
it's really hard. It's really hard to predict that. And so I found like um, I overscoped a little bit, and I ended up spending like half of my time working on the game, just like trying to squeeze my code down, basically.
Right, right. If you're coming in with a very sloppy kind of like I'm going to solve all of my problems with infinite numbers of if else loops, then
Yeah, exactly.
you have to it's good practice to teach you like, hey, maybe you can make these more efficient. Uh, as someone who is often inefficient until I have to go back and re look at my stuff and be like, this is miserable to look at.
Yeah. So at a certain point, it's like, well, maybe I can make, the lighting system and like the pathfinding and the aggro system all kind of rely on the same block of code, and that makes things uh, possible.
Right, right.
Um,
And you can never kind of get like ahead of yourself. And also, like, what better way to avoid feature creep than I don't have enough code to make more features?
yeah.
Or like a
And
lot.
then you get into weird stuff like I ended up putting almost all of like the data for the game into like a giant string, which is in a second cart that gets passed through the memory to the first one, and I overscoped a little bit, but it ended up working out in the end.
Yeah, yeah. As long as you get it all figured out, and as long as it all works, like
It's like a puzzle.
right, right. It's the problem of I want to make this painting, but the canvas is only so large.
Yeah,
Games were born into or like modern game development when it's become very accessible for a lot of people is like born into like the infinite canvas, so you don't have that practice of limited space.
yeah, for sure.
That is, I think, a good thing to pick up on, and that things like Pico 8 are good for teaching people, hey, you don't just because you can make a million files doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah, that was kind of a refreshing thing working with it because when at first I was just kind of playing around because I'd been interested in it a while. Like this is the first thing I've made in Pico 8, and when I've decided like I'm gonna do this, I guess I knew that it wasn't gonna be like a 2 year project like my previous games or whatever. I knew that it was gonna be shorter. It still ended up taking longer than I expected.
Yeah.
I worked on it, I think for 4 months, but
Compared to 2 years, that's basically a weekend.
yeah, and this was like something I'm putting out there for free and stuff. So I didn't want it to be a 2 year project because
Right.
that's probably not a wise financial decision.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. But people still do it. People still have like,
Yeah, yeah. If you can make it work, that's great.
yeah. No, I was cautioning that I think a lot of people don't make it work.
Yeah. And I
That's
think, yeah, I'm in a very privileged place to be able to spend 4 months just working on something for fun. Um,
that was part of the genesis of this project was seeing a lot of like going to local shows and seeing the same game for 4 or 5 years, still not
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Because also that's kind of the only way that you people feel you can charge money for a game if it's within that kind of like development scale.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's this hope that if I force people to say no, this thing costs money, then maybe something that only you work on for 4 months or maybe even 4 days, you could be like, no, it's $2, and people would be like, that's fine by me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I left like the pay what you want thing on itch there. So a
Yeah,
few people have thrown me some money, which is nice.
yeah. I think there's maybe like people are sort of, I can feel at least within some people the exhaustion of content, uh, the exhaustion of endlessly available content, especially now that you realize that people are just taking it away, that it's not actually endless.
Yeah.
That people are like, oh no, as like people are like, ah, well, it's cost too much money to pay these people royalties for their show, so we're just gonna not pay it anymore. It's cheaper that way. And
Yeah. Not great.
right, and it was like, oh, we don't lose anything because we'll just make another thing that will cancel in 3 days and then take off our service.
Yep.
And it's kind of like this endless cycle because it's the problem of when like the platform truly superseding the creators. Like I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
I think games run into that problem sometimes in a real bad way with publishers getting like the fore focus instead of like that's how you get the ideas of Devolver style games, and why so many of those studios are like one and done game studios.
Yeah, definitely like the focus is definitely more on this is the brand and this is we're focusing on this thing right now.
Right, right. Like a publisher having a house style that is actually composed of dozens of studios that.
Yeah, that's really interesting and kind of strange.
Right, right. Like because you can point at like the difference between like an Annapurna versus a Devolver game, but it's not like they made those.
Yeah, that's true.
But even like you've even got platforms like itch who like are saying like it was very weird when they were like McPixel 3 by Devolver Digital. I'm like, Devolver didn't make that game. You know that.
Yeah, and I think that influences like it must influence the type of games people choose to make as well, because they know that
Right,
they'll appeal to the bigger publishers, the bigger
right,
indie
right,
publishers. Yeah.
right. So it's like, I guess I'm gonna make a pixel violence game because I hope Devolver gives me some money. And it's a weird thing that at least from my growing up through it, I did not I knew like other artists like musicians or like filmmakers or actors more than I knew like Sony Pictures or Warner Music Group in the same way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I don't,
it's a little different for sure in the games industry, I think.
I don't
I don't know how like the most consumers like how much they care about like who publishes the games, but
yeah. Or if they even know their publisher, or if they think Devolver is a developer,
yeah,
or like
yeah,
Activision are developers.
yeah, especially because they have that sort of house style, right? Like it would be easy to misread that.
And it's a weird thing to get into, but
Hmm.
it's a interesting approach to like I think why it's cool because also if you spend like 5 seconds on itch, you'll see a lot of people making a lot of different kinds of games, and like
Yeah, for sure. And I think like it's not like Devolver only publishes those types of games. I think
right,
especially recently they've started branching out a little bit, and hopefully that kind of trend continues.
right.
We'll see more types of games from publishers that traditionally were kind of had just this kind of one style or whatever.
hope. One would only hope, but
Yeah.
you're asking a company to dilute their brand is a
Yeah,
little
that's true. Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah.
But it's also it's like, I mean, if people get money, it's nice, I suppose. But there's always
Yeah. And
the sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think there's also just sort of trends that sit on top of that. Like, uh, maybe cozy games are popular now, and like so, Devolver or whoever might try dipping their toes into it, just because that's like the current thing that people are interested in, right?
Right, right. And it kind of is uh, the thing I always worry about is just like the longevity, like
Yeah.
you hear, the games industry, everyone just burns out of it so quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue.
And you run into that same problem. I think you can run like, whether it's a AAA studio grinding you into dust, or like getting a publisher and not having like like you don't get a multi-game deal because like your
Yeah.
studio isn't as important to like you know XY publisher, because there's a bunch of other games that have that kind of same style, so they're not looking for a next game from them. You're just like, someone else is going to pick up that reign. And
Yeah, I think going for that, being like an indie studio trying to do commercial stuff, that can be really overwhelming. Trying to just even trying like pitching to publishers and all that stuff, um, is can be like a big mental drain on you. Um,
right, and even if there's an increasing number of like smaller like indie publishers coming out, that are just like, but also like when you go further down the notoriety of publishers, like what is the cash drop off that goes with it?
yeah, it's really hard to know these things when you're pitching, and I don't know. I had trouble. Like my last commercial game I put out myself, I didn't go with the publisher, and part of that is because like I tried pitching to some publishers, and I don't take rejection well, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just gonna release it myself.
Let me tell you, for someone who gets rejected quite frequently, it is exhausting.
Yeah, you gotta work up to, like a tolerance to that, I guess. Um, but it's really hard for sure.
Because at this point, I've run into the same issues sometimes where I'm like, well, if it's not accepted here, where will it ever get accepted? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Like this seemed like the perfect publisher. The talks were going well, and then all of a sudden they don't want it, and
right.
it's
Oh,
very demotivating. Yeah,
your phone pops up that notification. You see that the first word is unfortunately,
yeah,
and you're like, oh, I don't know where this is going. I know it's going to be. Unfortunately, it's so hard for us to pick between our selections. But luckily for you, as the selection we picked, nobody would ever start a email like that.
yeah,
But it is like there's always the worry that like when you pitch, like if you don't get in, will you ever get in?
yeah. Definitely.
Or is it just like the same six people hiring each other for jobs, and it can feel just like we'll say the IGF bragging that two publisher backed titles swept the awards. It would not fill an independent developer with confidence, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It feels like not the brag you think it is, perhaps.
Yeah,
But I think there is like space maybe for all sorts of like different experiences in games. At least
yeah.
that's
I think so. I think that's what's exciting about games.
at least that's what I'm hoping on. That's what I'm
Yeah,
hanging my whole hat on.
Yeah, I think it's hard if you're trying to make money to like not chase the trends.
Yeah.
And in that case, things can get homogenized. But there's always people sort of on the outsides of this doing interesting stuff as well.
Right.
Uh, and the occasional, um, publisher willing to invest money or take a chance on something different.
Right. Right. And it's like you can see people be like, oh, to sustain your project, just like do you spend 4 months making a Vampire Survivors like, and you're just like, but what if I don't want to do that?
Yeah.
Even if it would make me like a little bit of money to kind of just churn out uh, an on trend like a flavor of the month game in a couple of months that like does well enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's is I think that's kind of the gap. I think that would be traditionally filled by like freelance work in other mediums, or like advertise, like an artist doing advertising work, or being like a studio musician, and those kinds of like just like gig style work. That
Yeah. And
that
I
it,
sort of that's sort of been like what I my approach has been like going back and forth between working on my own projects and doing contract work for uh, like indie studios and stuff, which has been fine and good.
yeah,
And I've been lucky to work on some really cool projects with good people.
right. It's tricky. So the question is, how do you become a senior with 3 years of experience if shipped 15 games? Because it seems
Yeah,
like that is generally speaking what everybody is looking for,
yeah, yeah. It's hard if you're starting out to know how to approach any of that.
or just lie, say you are, say. But who knows? I have filled out applications, and like I'm like, wait a minute. So shipping games working with developers and shipping games for like 2.5 years consistently is not uh qualities of a production role. Then I don't know what is anymore.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So
Sometimes people's expectations seem sort of out of whack in that regard, I think.
right. The only way to get in the room is to already be in it, and it's like it's a tricky thing for people to navigate, which is why I'm hopefully doing my best to build a little house off to the side
Yeah,
with an open door.
that's great.
Just won't build a door on it, then you can just
Yeah,
walk right in.
I think that's a good approach.
But it is like a difficult thing for people. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of it's one of those curse experiences to be what's the word I'm looking for, ahead of your time, or because I wonder how many like games being made now, they're looked upon fondly a decade later, where they become deeply influential, and then the creator long long abandoned that project, long abandoned that life. It's like, where were you all a decade ago?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It takes time for things to catch up sometimes.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught in the trap, or get lost rather in the
Yeah.
cracks, as things are kind of more. There's I think games came up in a bad time. We needed to be making games when there weren't the internet, which was a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, when you go back to the shareware, sending sharewares and then ordering
Yeah,
floppies over the mail and stuff.
I sometimes think we needed a little bit more time in the to let like the medium develop outside of the kind of mass media internet times, which is a tricky thing because how else do you distribute them? Is the easiest way to get them growing, but there's like that foundation I think feels like it's missing, which is why it can feel so financially top heavy.
Yeah, definitely. I think like we are in like a really exciting time where there's lots of cool stuff happening. It's just a lot of the people doing that stuff can't make it their full-time thing, right?
Right, right. Can barely make it their
Which,
part-time thing.
yeah, and I don't know if it's reasonable to be able to expect that to be different, but it would be nice for sure.
Yes, yeah. If like all your favorite indie developers weren't having medical GoFundmes,
Yeah,
weren't like, hey, if you could throw my coffee a couple bucks, um, I'm a deeply influential freeware developer,
yeah, that'd be cool.
which is why I always I appreciate the sentiment, but I always have like a sideways glance to like free game lists and promotional stuff because it's like it feels like it's like sort of cordoning off these games from the real games that are on Steam that you pay money for.
Yeah, I appreciate how like in Indiepocalypse you've got sort of a mix of paid stuff and free stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and I link to everybody's stuff because I want to be like, hey, if you want to actually just play, if you want to play without paying for anything, I do also want you to do that.
yeah,
Like, but the, part of it is like just putting up the that expectation that you should pay. Like people used to pay for music,
yeah.
pretty regularly. That was a thing that people would pay for.
I still do that, but
Yeah,
I know I'm strange for doing that, but
no, I do. I mean, I grew up reading, scanlations, but then also buying comics at the same time that I read. I'm a weird edge case. I pirated PS2 games as demo discs basically, and then would sometimes would buy them if I liked them.
yeah,
So I've always been a personal fringe case, but I think by and large, accessibility of something like Spotify. Me to go, why would I buy music? It's all there for free,
yeah,
or the low cost of like $10 a month, when that's like sometimes the cost of a whole album is $10.
yeah, and that was kind of something that made me a little hesitant to work on like a free game for a while because I don't want to like dilute other people's projects and that kind of thing by
Yeah,
adding. But at the same time, like especially like the roguelike genre, a lot of those games are, long time sort of open source projects, and the game I based my game on is also a free open source game, and like so I want to sort of get back to that community.
yeah, yeah, and I think free art is good. you
Yeah.
know, it's that tricky thing where after the artist releases their free game, they have to like go eat something,
Yes.
and they just don't give you that stuff for free, which is the kind of the problem of it all is that we have to work for food, and
Hmm.
shelter and comfort in life. If we could get rid of if we get rid of that problem, things would be a lot easier, and then we'd have all games would be freeware because people would always make art.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that like, I previously released a game that is still bringing in some money, and like I've worked on some successful projects and stuff, so I can afford to do this right now.
Right.
But I recognize that that is kind of like a unicorn situation, and most people can't do that.
No, yeah, I can only do this because I spent like a decade paying off debt,
Yeah,
and that's the secret to art is having no debt or minimal debt. When you don't have to pay money to this box and then not get anything out of that box every month.
yeah. I can by no means do this for forever.
Right.
At some point, I'll need to do a paying thing again.
This is very far from a full-time job for me. I have a
Yeah,
9 to 5.
yeah.
And if it isn't for like that kind of stuff, it would not work. It would all disappear.
Hmm.
But it's like I want to help create it more of a space where people can be like, I think even from the beginning there was the idea that Indiepocalypse is not anyone's, like no one's going to get rich off of it, and no one's
Yeah,
going to Like it's not a huge thing, but it is like part of an income. It is.
Yeah, it's an extra thing, and it's you're sort of carving out a cool space for people to discover stuff they wouldn't have otherwise, right?
Right. It's like like it's like a year on tour, or like
Yeah,
a I I mean very directly. It's I wrote a thing for an anthology,
yeah,
and then I got a little money for it, and then but I also wrote things for 6, 7, 8 other anthologies, and that is how I sustained myself through the year between that and my own personal work. But the problem is there are not 6, 7, 8 other anthologies.
yeah,
there, there is like one active one, maybe. But aside from I think like the Hand Eye Society mixtape, there are no other sort of like regular active open submission game
yeah,
anthologies.
yeah. Things that actually pay people and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and then even
yeah,
that. No, continue.
I was just I think it's but like the just like providing that space is also important for people to like, oh, there's these things going on and I can make something cool and submit it to that. Um, like this doesn't pay out to anybody, but I work with a group here in Ottawa, Dirty Rectangles, and we used to have like in-person meetups where people would come show stuff on a projector, and just like having that community and someone to show things to, or like know that there's people paying attention to what you're doing or giving you feedback, that kind of thing is also really
Yeah.
important.
Eric,
And
would you believe that I helped to organize an entire video built around local scenes because I think they're so important?
yeah, that's cool. Um, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I had made a whole I had like because the kind of thing is like how you yeah there because it's so easy for like without that scene does anyone look at your stuff or are you just like throwing it up on itch and hoping for the best?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But
And then we recently, or a couple of years before the pandemic, like started doing them in Toronto as well. But then since then, we've just been doing them on Twitch, uh, and we sort of fell off doing it now for the last few months. Um, so that's a little sad.
yeah, but that is it's that kind of when you don't have the same like physical space to work in, and it's not like a thing you're going like, oh, I get to go to a place and meet all my friends, and maybe we'll eat a pizza.
Yeah, it was very different, and in some ways, like there were some cool things that we couldn't do at the physical ones. Like we can now, if we want to, like if we don't have enough local people who want to show stuff, we can have a mix of local people and then other people who we invite on,
Yeah,
and that kind of thing. But it's not, there's not the same, like you can't go off and have a conversation with somebody else,
right.
or that kind of thing, or like you're not seeing everybody's faces, every month or whatever. Um,
Yeah, and it's that same problem. It's that kind of like a thing where like, oh, well, now that you don't have to go to a place, it's open to way more people. But also now that it's all online and we're not all forced into a physical space, it's easier for people to keep to only the people they know.
yeah, exactly.
So it's this weird mixture of like it could be, it can, and even the same thing can at times probably be like, oh, it's way more open than it ever was. But then also, oh no, it's actually way more closed off than it's ever been. Now you need
Yeah, and
to.
it goes from being like, this is an event I'm gonna take my evening to go to like, this is something I'll maybe tune into if I see the Twitter post about it or whatever.
Right, right, right. And it's like, will I even? It's a lot easier to sit at your computer and not engage and like sit in the corner of a room and not talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Although it also I think probably can be easier to still sit in the corner of a room and not talk to anybody in the right
Yeah,
circumstances.
that's true. And like this is specific to our event, but like because we were, uh, for example, hosting them at a bar, like that was excluding some people who
Yeah,
now are no longer excluded. And like been thinking about that kind of stuff for if we eventually start having them in person again, who knows?
right. Finding like a more kind of neutral space.
Yeah, I think that would be a positive thing.
Yeah, because they're the kids are good at making games, you know.
Yeah.
They're real. It's like, it's the same thing where you see like, wow, look at this amazing art, and then you're like, they're what? They're like 14. Holy crap!
Yeah,
Just,
that's one thing I missed was like when we were doing them in person, we would get like the local college or whatever, some of the professor would be like, "Hey, go check this thing out," and then we have all these groups of students come and show off what they're working on, which now I don't see that stuff.
yeah. No, I loved going to events and kind of like poisoning students' minds early on with like, you can just make real freak stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
At the very least, I will be there to support you.
Yeah, keep it weird, and we will enjoy it if it's weird. So don't feel like you can't show off your weird stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about like going with what like the textbook says, or like following the someone's tips on YouTube, or like that you got because you had to subscribe to their Substack, because the age old advice: if someone's selling you get rich tips, what they're selling you is the tips, and if they if they really got rich off of them, they wouldn't need to sell the tips.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, hey, what if you just kind of made whatever you felt like making, and it creates like a good the alt culture is kind of exists, but is not like cohesive enough that you can easily point at it, I think.
Yeah.
Because like it's more like a bunch of like individual groups that may or may not even be like accessible at all, to someone who's outside of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard to discover someone who has no following, right?
Right.
And at the in-person events, I really liked seeing stuff that was like half done and broken and that kind of thing, which people don't usually release online.
Yeah, yeah. But it's like that half broken thing might just forever stay a half broken thing if you don't get to show it at an event where people are like, oh, this is really cool, but also this part does not work.
Yeah, exactly.
Is non-functional. But that same person could get just like burned out after 3 months because they're just like have no one to show it to.
Yeah, that's actually a thing. Since I gotten into the Pico 8 stuff, which was cool, is that there's a lot of people posting their work in progress carts and stuff online, and there's like collaboration and stuff happening. So it's a neat space, I think.
Yeah, I think there has been more space for very like self-indulgent work. I mean, there's always been things like, I mean, how long is like Glorious Trainwrecks has been around for like a very long time.
Yeah, it has.
So there's always been that space for people just kind of making just more like I think it's almost more not akin to sketching necessarily or jamming, but it's kind of like jamming in the way that you think what jamming is,
Yeah.
like musically speaking, where it's kind of like I'm just noodling around and seeing what comes out of it, with not a worry of commercial products.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Glorious Trainwrecks is very cool. Jeremy, who's like one of the people who started it, is here in Ottawa as well.
Yeah, the other the other secret thing you learn is like how small a lot of the spaces are, but also you realize that, oh, why are these, like I would come across in the process of doing this a lot of developers out of like Massachusetts, and even like more specifically the Boston area, which I am adjacent to. I would not say I'm in it.
Yeah.
But and I was like, why did I used to go to meetups and I've never seen any of these people before. I've never heard of any of these people.
Yeah.
So it also shows like the weakness of like, even within like a city, like, oh, that area is more inaccessible to me,
Yeah, not everyone's gonna want to come out to these things or even be aware of them.
Right, and there's like it depends, like how open is it, or does it feel like an open like not club but like an open community space, or does it feel like a friend group?
Yeah, that can be a thing, and stuff like well, for us, one thing we struggled with was like 90% of the people who came uh, were like were just like cis guys, right? So
Yeah.
that can put off some people. Um,
Right, right. To be like, it's tricky if you're like the one person who doesn't look like everybody else. It can
yeah,
feel
yeah,
like,
exactly.
oh, just like that. Very like, why do I feel like maybe this space isn't for me?
Hmm.
It's and even if you're making like they're making all the same games, there is that kind of like, or you wonder like, oh, why does this space look so homogenous? Oh, maybe I'll just come back. Maybe I just won't come back. Maybe there's a reason
Yeah,
why it's so homogenous.
I think as like organizers, that's something we fell short of, and like when if we get back to the in-person ones, and even with the online ones, we're trying to, you know, it's hard to, but like actively try and fight back against that, and make people feel welcome in
Right.
every way that we can, and seek out people if they're willing to come out and make sure they feel comfortable there, right?
Right, right. Because then it's like also, are you just? It's because it's something I think a lot about. Because I try to keep the perspectives in Apocalypse as wide as possible. I try to
Yeah,
include as many people as I can from all sorts of different walks of life. It's why I always make sure to include like. It's easy to forget to include non-American in the parts of when you're looking
yeah,
for different groups of people, and it's something I think about a lot. It's like, well, what if people are just like not from like consciously also looking for people who aren't from the U.S.
yeah,
or from just like England, the kind of where you think games come from.
yeah. That's a good thing to be conscious of for sure,
But it's
because
also
people are
like,
making cool stuff all over the world.
yeah, I've hit all the continents. Yeah,
That's good.
the livable continents, I should say.
No Antarctic games.
Not that I know about. But everywhere else,
Yeah,
I'm up to. I
good.
never haven't done a count, but I think it was something like 20 different countries or something, or
Yeah,
20
that's
plus
good.
countries. Like it's a lot, but it's also as someone who side eyes diversity initiatives when people are talking
Yeah,
about it, I always feel suspicious when they're talking about it,
yeah,
and I can only imagine that if you are the recipient of initiatives, sometimes that you can feel suspicious. Like, am I actually allowed here? Am I wanted here as a like a statistic or as a person?
yeah, yeah. And that's tricky to you don't want to make people feel that way.
Right, right. You don't want you don't want to just be like, oh, am I at this Ottawa game event so that at their end of year wrap up they can say, oh, our group is only 50% white, 50%, or then it's like 30%. Am I just a percentage on there?
Yeah, you don't want to be an item on a checklist.
Yeah, right. The traditional United States binders full of women. Right. You don't want to be in that binder, and
Yeah,
which is why I try to usually not swing diversity as like a selling point,
yeah,
because it also feels like it is cheap in selling someone's identity that like they didn't give me permission to be like, oh, look, I am taking someone's not their work, not their art, but like them as a person, and using that as an excuse to to buy my product in a scope that where that is not like the intended, like it is not like the queer games bundle where that is like the intended focus.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's more like the intended focus is like alternative games, and then it's like, well, what do I have to do with that? What does me as a person have to do with that? And it's always a tricky thing to think about, because also there is that temptation to be like, well, if I just go whole hog into parading this around, uh, you know, shine a big virtue signal into the sky as bright as I can, that
Yeah,
that people will pay attention, but will they be pay attention for like the right reasons?
Yeah, that's always a risk, I think. And I don't know exactly how to navigate these things, but I think just, being intentional and seeking people out and developing a reputation for being like a space for them it takes time and work, right?
Right, right. It's always it's in this constant era of I feel like where nevermore has in the human history has the human being, the personal life been part of a brand. Never has our personal lives been inseparable from our brand lives,
Yeah.
and it is tricky to not view people as resources for you
Yeah. Yeah.
when that is kind of like advice is like, oh, it's like uh, a community, an audience is but another resource for you to exploit, and that is what is advised of you of, and it is. I'm just too old, maybe. I think too uh, uh, too old and DIY or whatever it is that is like I don't want to. I have a Discord, I suppose, but I don't like
Yeah.
it.
You don't want to be a brand. Yeah.
I don't. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of like here's a group of people that I must engage with. I never. Well, partially because somebody has the handle of Indiepocalypse, but also the idea of monitoring two accounts and being like logging on and being like, "What's everyone playing today?" and putting a GIF of like Mario doing something.
Yeah.
It's like whenever I see someone talk to a brand, I think to myself, "What are you doing with your life?" I recognize that there is another person on the other end of that is also in the equally unenviable situation of pretending to be being a person, pretending to be a brand, pretending to be a person.
Yeah.
And I
It's very weird. And at least they're getting paid to do that,
right, and
hopefully.
I wish those social media managers the best, but it is a very strange experience to see people interact with Pepsi in the same way
Yeah.
that they would their own family.
Yeah. Definitely very weird.
But anyway, that's enough of those things. This kind of, like I said, this show goes by very easily. It's just kind of people meandering and talking, and I, left to my devices, will talk for a very long time.
That's all good. I like having conversations.
Yeah, yeah. I've realized now that I have to like. Oh my god, I have another pledge drive coming up, which is me running my mouth for 8 hours.
Yeah. Well, I've been stuck in my house basically for 2 weeks, so
Nice.
it's good to have conversations with people, I think.
Yes. No. I've.
Even though it feels like I haven't done much of that in a while.
Yeah. The key to is to not need much social interaction. I remember hearing.
Yeah.
Uh, I was listening to a podcast, you might say, and of reminding myself that podcast hosts are never your friends. People, they're strangers who don't know you. But I remember listening to one, and someone was talking about like how someone else was saying you haven't really gone out much lately. And like, what are you talking about? I've been doing my 3 or 4 podcasts, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. There's like you have like these like weekly like very intense social interactions, these like long sort of meaningful ones, and you're like, that's good for me, and I'm like done for the day, especially
Yeah.
if you're not like truly by yourself. And there
Yeah,
are like
it can be draining for sure.
uh, I suppose it's different if you're like you work from home alone, but if you like don't live alone or go to a job, but there's like even like there's like just being around other people for brief moments. Well, I'm getting sidetracked. We're going down a weird,
It's all good.
a unnecessary road at this point. But instead of that, what if we go down a very necessary road which is to ask you the standby weekly question, and we're going to see how this goes, which is, Eric, Mochi has a question, and it is, do you have a favorite Toho character?
I do not. I'm sorry.
No need to apologize. This is a safe space here for people who know too much about Toho, and for people who know nothing about Toho.
I know very little. Yes.
Both are equally welcome here. I'm knowing increasing amounts of it. It's a cool thing. I'll say that it's cool.
Okay.
And it's like, it feels singular, and I wish other things kind of, it's kind of like free sharing of IP, if you will, is very neat.
I'll have to investigate it more.
Yeah. The short of it is a guy made a thing with people, but all the characters you're free to just kind of make stuff with.
Right. Yeah, and where there's like a community around it, but I don't exactly understand it. So.
Yeah, they're basically bullet hell games, but then people will make like Metroidvanias or card games.
Yeah, that's the connection I never got. Because like bullet hell is traditionally not a genre I would associate with characters and stories.
No, and they're barely there, the characters, but they're like fun designs and like broad enough characters, that you can like easily latch onto, and people just kind of like, I wonder how much of it's like just this like collective character building, that people have these ideas and like they take these broad strokes and paint them in their different directions.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a neat thing, but enough of what. So, Eric, what would you say is a good? Because I think if we go all the way back, I think what you said, like, Rogue is a bad entry point, and Rogue likes and Rogue likes and all these things. It is good to have those as an entry point to like a truly dense genre.
Yeah.
In the same way that you don't start anything with like the heaviest stuff, you don't enter any dense genre of art by going, well, I'm just gonna dive foot first into the deepest deep end of this.
Yeah.
What would you say is a good intro, you think?
Do you mind if I go away for like 1 minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be right back.
I will fill space with what do people do on Twitch all day? They talk to, and I know what they do. They talk to the chat. They're like, "Hey guys, how you doing today? I love seeing you there today. Oh, we got Exo Drifter in the chat today. Look at that. It's a fun little emote." I traditionally do not speak. This is a radio show. I am speaking to my guest. There's not a chat here. Outside of people that I know, people who have been on the show, I'm allowed to talk to in the chat because they're kind of like in the Indiepocalypse radio open door policy. They're allowed to walk into the studio, so to say. But it is a stressful thing to me of like shouting out usernames and like the one way street of the relationship is like, hey, yeah, I really wish, I think the pledge drive, my dream is to one day for it to be allowed to be like a studio show. I would love to put on a studio show. I would love to just like take the pirate radio into its next logical step of like public access style talk show. It would be a beautiful thing, but you need everyone. I think I am no space ghost coast to coast, so I cannot justify myself talking to screens of people. No, I would need people in a room with me. But
right, I'm back.
Hello, I'm just waxing poetically on the concept of public access.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, I drank too much water during our conversation.
Oh no, I haven't drank any, or not, or rather, not enough. I have.
Go ahead.
No, I just have a very big jug.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have to get up and down.
So when we left off, you were asking me about what is a good entry to the roguelike genre.
I'm a scared baby. I don't know. When I drink a drink, I want to know what's inside of it.
So you mean like the traditional like turn-based hack and slash dungeon crawler type thing,
or just like this, or either or. Like, what do you think is this a good entry point to kind of the procedural style that feels like less of a because I think there's a difference between procedural random generation style of something like Rogue and the kind of like a slot machine ethos that can permeate a lot of roguelikes.
Yeah. I think games that are in sort of the roguelite genre that sort of distill it really, really well would be a good intro, which I'm going to name two games that probably a lot of people have already played, but for me Spelunky was that, so I'm going to say Spelunky, although for me it was the original pixel art one that I played, and also stuff like FTL. FTL is a really good game, and it has a lot of those elements in it. As far as the more like traditional ones with the turn-based combat and all that, where you're crawling through dungeons. I haven't actually played that many of them. I think, well, my favorite one is Brogue, and I think that one is pretty approachable.
Yeah.
If you're okay with ASCII graphics, that's like the main thing, because it's got like it's very good at like conveying information to you ahead of time, so you don't need to like look things up or experience something and die to know what it does. And it's also fairly simple. Like it's got a lot of really cool like environmental interactions and stuff between things, but there's not that many different types of enemies or items and that kind of thing. So it's closer to the original Rogue, I think, than most roguelikes are, and in that way, it's pretty simple and approachable. And then you've got, I'll name a couple of Android games. There's Pixel Dungeons, which is also influenced by Brogue. So I'm showing my bias here in liking those games where you don't have a class and instead you find cool items and power them up with scrolls, and that's sort of how you build your character. And that's kind of the core of those games. And Hoplite is a really cool game that's also an Android, that is hex based, and it's more like chess. Like it's a smaller board and the enemies are very predictable and stuff, but you're trying to get through 26 levels and retrieve the golden fleece or something, and it's got a lot of that cool like tactical feeling where like you have to predict where they'll move, and you have different moves that you power up each level and that affect what you can do, and there's a lot of stuff with like pushing enemies or jumping, or there's like different. There's a lot of different options you have, and each time you play, you sort of have different ones, which is fun.
Now, what do you think of this sort of, I guess, the sideways subgenre of the sort of like the mystery dungeon sort of game that I think existed across a lot? I'm realizing now that I'm like, wait a minute, is this all actually? In my mind, mystery dungeon was kind of like a different phrase, but now I'm realizing that maybe one studio did make all of these games.
I haven't played any of those. I don't know.
Because I was like in my mind there's like there's your classic Sheeran the Wanderers and all that.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was a different like lineage from like your Chocobo and Pokemon Mystery Dungeons and all those like what whatever that Genesis one is called that I can't think of the name of. Which I think is technically a different thing. Roguelike.
Yeah. I
Fatal
haven't
Labyrinth.
played any of those, but it seemed like they would probably be an approachable point to start as well.
Yeah. It's all if you want more graphics.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like 2023. What if we all got sicko freaks and we all just started slowly getting our way into Rogue?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, people are like telling you, hey, it's the year of Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is
well, I'm going to strongly recommend Rogue just because it's my favorite. And
yes,
it does, even though it's ASCII, it has like really cool lighting effects and stuff. So it's still pretty to look at.
And ASCII art also can look very cool, very good.
Yeah.
Like it's not like there's still a style to it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's still a specific look. But
yeah, it's a very unique looking game, despite being ASCII.
But anyway, Rogue, what a weird thing. I guess it's just are every now there was something I thought about for popped in my mind for a moment. Are there any other genres that are so like, or any other mediums where the genres are so defined by just using the names of like a prominent progenitor game?
Yeah, that's like any other genres in games, you mean, or is there?
Or just any other like mediums where like
Yeah, I don't know. Because I know there's like in games, there's like Metroidvania. That's the other big one I could think of that's named that way, and it's weird and bad name.
FPSs were Doom clones for a long time.
Yeah.
And this kind of like
I'm trying to think of like movies.
Right.
That's not a thing, right?
That's what I was thinking. I was looking for at least one example. But I mean, I guess movies is a stupid enough name anyway. So, given that they are images that move,
yeah. I feel like I can see movies being described. If like a director has a really distinct style, then someone might say another movie is like whatever, like Kubrick-esque or whatever. But it's not like a common thing.
No, that is also like very pulling off from like a specific person's like but they're not calling films Kubrick likes.
No, that's not. It's not a thing.
Imagine every film that was slightly twee was called an Anderson like, and then you would have Anderson likes that are slightly different. They don't have father issues in them, but they still carry some of the like aesthetics of them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's a weird convention, and I don't think other mediums should adopt it because it's confusing if you don't know what Rogue is. Right.
I remember it's why I do like, even though it is also using another franchise's name, I prefer almost the term Mystery Dungeon because it sounds more generic.
That tells you what it is in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Though that is also technically a franchise, but it is a broader term.
All right, we'll just start calling them I don't know, permadeath procedural dungeon crawlers.
Yeah, right. There was another good name. I think it was like the translation of what they called Metroidvanias in Japan that I liked, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah, I feel like Metroidvania there's probably like a catchy name you could come up with. I don't know what you would come up with for roguelikes, but
also because like, let's be honest, 90% of Metroidvanias are more like Vanias because they're just Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
And like the Metroid shell is lost.
Like there's got to be a better name for you explore and find powers that let you access places you couldn't get to before.
Right. Especially when so many of them are like not search action.
Yeah.
That is the obviously the literal translation is search action.
Okay.
Tansaku action, or
I like that.
but that is
Doesn't really roll off the tongue, but
no, but
there's something there, I think.
it does more describe kind of what it is, because
Yeah.
there are some like the those Ladybug games are very much like level. Did I? Yeah, I think this Team Ladybug. The people who made the Team Ladybug, who made the Lodoss War and the Toho. I say with extreme air quotes, Metroidvanias,
Yeah.
because they're more like level-based games
Okay.
that happen to take place in a singular space. But like, anyway, I really like a game convention, and I think it's interesting to talk about what makes a genre and like what it is like, because I think feel is like extreme, like what is the good part about Symphony of the Night, that you explore a castle, or is it that you press the button and Alucard slides backwards and it feels really cool to do that?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's as much about that as it is about like the higher level stuff, right?
Right. I remember when I was recently playing that Toho, and the character like spun around on her heel in that very like Alucard style, and I was like, oh, that is like the movement of the game is like just as important as the fact that the castle goes upside down.
Yeah, back to the one game I forgot to mention for games to get into traditional roguelikes is Doom roguelike. I think that one's really good and approachable. And it has the sounds from Doom in it, so if you like Doom, then that's an entry point.
Yeah, I mean, I played on my I was playing Doom RPG on my flip phone back in the day, which is a whole other, technically not a roguelike because it's like a linear RPG, but
right. Yeah, Doom RL, I guess it is what it's called.
The roguelike. Doom the roguelike. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like there's. Anyway, before I get into why Doom is good, it's because the music rips and it's fun to play, and it's got a cool style to it, and it's just long. Anyway, I think game history is cool, and I love old stuff.
Yeah, me too.
In like every medium, and I recently had just like sampled a little bit of everything within the US NES catalog.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, most of these games are not old. Like they don't feel old. Like there's like you realize that just kind of like with every medium, there's games don't just like linearly get better. It's neat.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff, and there's also a lot of crappy like branded platformer games.
Right. There have always been
so
bad
many
games. There was like so
many.
It's
like a 50% chance if you try a game you haven't played before.
There are so many utterly forgettable jet games where I play as a jet and then the background tilts and spins. I saw so much of that like two-tone background that rotates. It's clearly just a background image that is spinning. But yeah, there's so much. I want to kill the term retro. I hate it.
It's a descriptive term.
Yeah, it feels too much like it is stuck in its era. Could you imagine? Could you imagine retro cinema? To go back to to use the earlier example, imagine thinking someone calling Kubrick a retro director.
Yeah, it's if you say retro cinema, then like I had no idea what era you're talking about. So
right,
Um, it's the same thing with like classic rock, I guess.
Right, right. Well, classic rock is just ever expanding.
Yeah,
Nirvana, Nirvana's classic rock,
yeah, exactly.
but it's still also Led Zeppelin. It just is a pile that gets added to. But
Yeah, increasingly less distinct pile of music.
yeah,
Or yeah,
just whatever the three hits are that exist forever. But anyway, music is a whole sub topic that I
yeah,
don't have time to get into. Even though the show is very much about music, all in a secret backward kind of way, in that I play a lot of music. I play like, what if
yeah.
people want to listen to 18 long psychedelic track I was listening to earlier? I'm like, yes. What if I Indiepocalypse Radio is my way of backdooring the Weedian catalog into the game developer landscape and other things. I like. How else? How else can I trick people into listening to anyway? Before I just start talking about music that I like, there's a lot of good music. There's a lot of
Yeah,
good.
there's tons of good music.
I have 1,400 song albums on my Bandcamp folder that I've yet to listen to.
Wow, that's a lot.
There's infinite amounts of art. And I guess that's to wrap it up. That's the point of this all, is that there is infinite amounts of art. I was thinking
Yeah,
about this just a moment ago before the show started, when I was reading, like, I think, what is the newest Black Sad book, and I was like, when was the last time I read an earlier one? And like, oh no, what's the other name of the guy, the Badger detective? I don't remember the name of that other comic, but the point of, like, it's impossible to ingest all art, because, or even to like develop a strict canon for yourself, because every
yeah,
work you experience reframes every other work that you've ever experienced.
yeah. Then you got to go back and experience them again.
Right, and then in doing so, you are it's an endless cycle.
Yeah,
You would experience two things back and forth forever, as they constantly reframe one another, and it's truly an impossible thing to get caught up in. And
yeah, yeah. Every time, a big part of art is the way it affects you, and that's going to change based on your current frame of mind or where you are.
right, even your, like, right, it's an impossible.
Yeah, that's as true with games as with anything else, I think.
Yeah, right. It's like you you listen to the influenced before you listen to the influencer, and then you go back and you listen to the influencer, then you get a new perspective for the influenced, and all these sorts of things. And it's an endless cycle. You go back and you watch old like adventure serials, and then you understand George Lucas a little bit more.
Yeah,
And you go, oh, he liked samurai movies.
yeah.
Um,
So, in conclusion, play Rogue,
yeah,
and then play Brogue,
yeah,
and then play my game.
right. And then go back and play Rogue,
Yeah,
and then take a sideways trip into a net hack for a little,
yeah,
if you really want to get twisted. But anyway, Eric, thank you for being here on the show with me.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find your stuff if they want to find it?
You can find, I got a website at sparse.ca. You
Beautiful.
can find
Loved.
me on itch at, yeah, I don't update my website very often. But you can find me at sparsegamedev.itch.io, and you can find me, I guess, on Twitter still at sparsegamedev, or on Mastodon at Eric B at the mastodon.gamedev.place.
Perfect. I don't know what to do with Mastodon, because it feels like a bunch of little forums, and I just gave up on it.
Yeah, it's I'm still getting used to it.
Because I'm like, what is the forum that I'm allowed to just go into, post my promotion once a month, and then never talk to it again? Because I feel like if you do that, like in just because when I realized that they're basically just forums, they're interconnected forums.
Yeah.
I was like, so I probably shouldn't just join like gamedev.social or whatever, because people can be like, oh, what's this guy who just comes in and posts? It's the same reason I don't post in Discord servers.
It's fine.
Um, but who knows? Yeah, and if you, for my part, I will say, hey, you should buy Indiepocalypse.
Yeah, do that.
It's a good thing. I'm a fan of the work. And if you buy an issue like, for instance, issue 35, someone like Eric here will get a little royalty kickback at some point. I think did you just get one?
I did.
You
I'm very,
you did.
very
You just got
thankful.
like $7 or something.
Yeah.
Listen, it's not a lot, folks, but that's it's $7 less that these people did not have 3 months ago or whatever.
Yeah, if you buy it, you could turn that $7 into $8 or $9 maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know. I
yeah,
didn't
that
do the
is
math on it.
right. Right. The idea is that Indiepocalypse is but one of many revenue streams for an artist. In the same way that you don't just put out one album and then say I'm done with music. In the same way you don't just like an actor does not appear, generally speaking, I will say an actor does not do one commercial or appear on one TV show and be like, I'm done, don't need to do that anymore, I'm gonna get royalty checks that fund my life forever.
Yeah.
Eh, a part of
And
it
for
was
anybody listening who wants to make games, you should make cool games and submit them to Indiepocalypse.
yeah, it's very easy. You just go to indiepocalypse.com/submit, and that's all there is to it. You just click and you add your thing there and the game gets added, and it's very easy. And I try my darndest to be like, hey, what if I just try to figure out how to support this thing going forward, because I also would like to make money off of it, so that everyone else can also, like, because if this is sustainable for me, then I mean the dream is that it's sustainable, and then I just do like I just start doing freak stuff and I start making like I go like 30 layers deeper to find like some 80s rogue like game that's like fascinating and is full of a million fresh ideas, but is like mired in is like buried away in archive.org somewhere. And I'm like, well, what if this got a fresh release, a fresh modern release with a bunch of interviews? And I would love to do something like that. That is my next
Cool.
dream, like to do very like Criterion style. Let's focus on preserving quote unquote important works and chalking them full of interviews and supplementing materials.
I will keep my eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, it's been 3 years and I'm not close, so you better keep those eyes very moisturized because they'll need to be peeled for a very long time. So keep the drops on hand. But that is one of those things that I speak about, so that one day I will feel that I will be able to do them, because I think it's the real problem with the death of physical media is the death of the commentary track, which I think, as someone who grew up loving those, who would sometimes watch them more so than even like watch full seasons worth of the like commentary tracks, they're just like, they're neat. Special features are neat.
Yeah, I like that stuff.
It allows you to like engage more with the work if you don't have someone to talk about it with. Having the creators talk about it with each other, or having interviews talk about it, is a way to like, because it can be hard if it's just like nobody wants to talk about me. No one wants to talk to me about this, you know. No one wants to talk to me about weird giallo movies or whatever. But the commentary tracks will.
Yeah, it gives you more context and like a different angle on it.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody will want to talk to me about Eyes Without a Face, even if it's not my friends. And even if I technically can't talk to them, I don't think that's technically. I think it's Italian, but it's anyway. Before I got too deep into saying Eyes Without a Face, is it technically giallo? I don't think so. Maybe it's in black and white, and I associate them heavily with color. Not the song, obviously. You stupid internet. I'm talking about. Why would I ever be thinking about the song? That reminds me of the time I tried to tell my phone to play the album The Monitor. It is not. I didn't think so, but it is. Oh, it's French language. Oh, because it's a French-Italian co-production. Yes, I was not wrong. All right, here we go. I tried to tell my phone to play The Monitor, and it played The Monitor being the Titus Andronicus album. But it played like a song from like the Destiny soundtrack. I was like, what? In what world is that anyone's ever like first choice? No, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't Destiny. It was Anthem.
Okay.
Not even Destiny. But follow the money is what I'm saying. I'm pointing at a camera that is not on. Follow the money. This is me doing my. But anyway, that's it. Indiepocalypse. Right. It's cool. It's by.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good. There are good people making good stuff within it.
Yeah, you can also make good stuff. You can make stuff with Pico 8 or with Click and Play.
Yeah, with anything. There's a Click Team Fusion game in Indiepocalypse.
Like, I've made a bunch of those.
Yeah,
they aren't in the apocalypse, but I made them when I was in high school.
Yeah, there's probably a game in Indiepocalypse from almost every era of RPG Maker. You know,
Nice.
There's like learn Unity if you want to get a job, but if you want to make art, it doesn't matter what engine you use.
Yeah,
you just use like what you're most comfortable with. And what feels like the closest to, if you think about it like this, if you want to make rock and roll music, you might ought to look at a guitar instead of a theremin to start with. In the same way that, yeah, you get what I'm saying. I don't need to extend the metaphor. Thank you for being here. I'm going to end the show now. Goodbye.